Friends, welcome to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. When you're having the best day of your life and you think that, you should know that it can only get worse. I used to think that the best day of my life was the day I married Janet Brown, now Mrs. Bobby Thomas. She was 24 years old, a new teacher at an elementary school in Macon, Georgia, where my older sister also taught. Janet was pretty, and my sister just had to set us up. I was 27, had just graduated from the University of Georgia Law School, and was a new law assistant at the firm of Bingham, Carlton, and Quick. In the first year of work, he earned $40,000. It took Janet and me a year to get married. At first, we met from time to time. Afterwards, she said that she fell in love with me from the first time we met, at a party my sister threw for new teachers and others. I was one of the others. Most of the others were representatives of local community organizations, so my sister introduced new teachers to Macon social life. I grew up here and know almost everyone. Obviously, I didn't need such acquaintances, but Frankie, my sister, thought I needed to meet the right girls. Janet grew up in South Georgia, studied at UGA, for the undereducated. This is the University of Georgia, on a partial scholarship, and was glad to move to Macon to start her teaching career. And I was glad to introduce her to Macon. As our dates got longer and longer, as usual, we went from a small number of kisses to a large number of them, and then to, "Bobby, honey, I'm sorry, but I'm just uncomfortable that you put your hand under my skirt. I mean, I like it and all that, but it's going to lead to more, and then, to even more, and I have to tell you, when I get married, I'm going to be one of those girls who walk down the aisle pure and immaculate, the perfect bride for her husband." "Wow," I replied. "You must have rehearsed this at least a few times. And maybe she used it on a few guys?" I wasn't really trying to insult her, but that's exactly what she thought. We were in my apartment, and she jumped up, said something about my bad intentions, and left. I sat there waiting for her to come back. I picked her up from her apartment, which she shared with two other girls, and we went out to dinner. I was wondering how she was going to get home. Later I found out from my sister Frankie, of course, that Janet had called her. Frankie picked her up, and they went to have coffee and chat with the girls. The next morning, Frankie called me to tell me, as only a sister can, to cool my feelings, that Janet was worried about me, very worried. But she was completely inexperienced, and in no case should I rush with her. "Hello." Janet answered the phone the next day. "Janet, it's me, Bobby. I'm calling to apologize for my comment last night. You were honest with me, and I said it without thinking about how important your words were. You mean a lot to me, and I hope you'll forgive me. Actually, I didn't care much about virginity, purity, and the like, but I really liked Janet, and I thought we could have a future together. And we really had it. A future together, I mean." 6 months later, she walked down the aisle in a small church in South Georgia, and we got married in a very traditional ceremony. She really turned out to be immaculate, but we fixed it on the first night of our honeymoon at the resort on Amelia Island. Love with Janet became pleasant, but at first it was a little difficult. By that time, I had not had love for a long time, and after I penetrated her, my constant stroking, which did not last long that first night, irritated her even more. She was crying, and I tried to comfort her, promising that everything would be fine. She said she knew about it. Her mother had warned her. Finally, we fell asleep and hugged each other, so that was a good sign. Janet surprised me the next morning. Although she was a virgin, she acquired some other skills in dealing with the men she dated. "And mind you, no hands," she said when I had recovered enough to look at her. "It's impressive." That morning we went to the beach and, returning to the room, took a shower together. I promised her that there would be no more pain and maybe she would enjoy it when we got back to bed. I moved further down, and she grabbed my head as if to stop me. "It's okay," I said. "It doesn't hurt." Janet went to the bathroom to tidy herself up a bit, and I stayed lying there feeling quite pleased with myself. She came back with a warm, damp washcloth and wiped my face. "No one has ever done this to me before," she said. "We need to work on both," I replied. And so it was. We were both patient, and love was really getting better. Janet learned that intercourse took longer, but sometimes her moments were more intense. So intense that she cried after some of them. "Bobby, you know that I love you, but when we got married, I didn't know how much I could love you. You make me glow from the inside out. You make me enjoy life. You make me—" Saying all this, she cried from that very moment. Hey, hey, calm down. I don't think I'm going to cry, but you know that I love you too, and I like making love to you. Over the years, we always went to bed together, even on nights when we didn't have love, even when I was overloaded with work at a law firm, or Janet was overloaded with papers for grades or lesson plans for preparation. Sometimes one of us would get up in the middle of the night or early in the morning to do paperwork, but going to bed together was a prerequisite for us. This meant that we hugged each other every night, made love often, and stayed connected to each other. We had been married for less than 6 years when I had what I thought was the best day of my life. There are not many flights to the small Macon airport, although the huge Atlanta airport is only 90 minutes away. In Nashville, I dealt with a retired hardware store owner in Macon. He wanted to make sure that the ownership would go exclusively to one of his children. We settled all the issues. He signed some papers and was satisfied, and I was happy. Find a direct flight from Nashville to Macon. On this flight, I met the man who made the best day of my life possible. John Thompson is a developer of shopping malls in Nashville. His niche is small towns, which, according to his calculations, are not serviced in terms of retail opportunities, but have great potential for growth. He identified Macon as one of these cities and flew there to look at possible locations for the construction of shopping malls. At that time, I was a senior associate at my law firm, but the partnership was still a few years away. It so happened that I sat next to John and spent the entire flight representing my law firm as the best in Macon and myself as the best lawyer for concluding deals on the development of shopping malls. To tell you the truth, I've never done deals like this in my life. But pretend until you get your way. That's what I did. John was impressed, either by the skills I was expounding or maybe just by my bravado. Anyway, he hired me, or rather, he hired my law firm. Over the next 2 years, we identified the best site, created a new LLC for John to purchase the site, negotiated with potential investors, concluded deals to raise capital and loans to finance the project, negotiated pre-leases for leading retail companies, and so on and so forth. The deal began to live its own life, and since John was most often in Nashville or somewhere else, this life depended more and more on me. I liked it. I admit that all this work has affected my personal life. I had less time left for my relationship with Janet, especially for those moments that don't mean anything at the moment, but are generally filled with meaning. Sitting on the couch in each other's arms and watching a stupid movie, going for ice cream at Dairy Queen, those moments that strengthen and cement a relationship. I managed to keep our commitment to always going to bed together, and I think it was incredibly important for us. But often I got up at 4 or 5 in the morning to work on spreadsheets or contract issues with an LLC, or on any other pressing issue. Finally, on Thursday morning, we closed a large loan, and my firm received the largest fee in its history. Jack Carlton, the managing partner of the firm, called me into his office, where he and 2 other partners opened a bottle of champagne. He handed me a glass. Bobby, when you started working with John Thompson 2 years ago, we had some concerns, pointing to our partners, that you were not suitable for this job. Too young, not experienced enough, not serious enough, if you know what I mean. I was silent. He wouldn't have handed me a glass of champagne if the news was bad. But you did a damn good job, maybe better than any of us could have done, he pointed at his partners again. You gave yourself completely to this project, impressed everyone you worked with, and frankly, made us a lot of money. A few minutes ago, before we opened the champagne, we held a quick meeting of the partners and voted for 2 things. First, for an immediate bonus of $100,000 as compensation for what you did. And secondly, for the offer to join us as a partner from the moment the agreement came into force, in recognition of what kind of lawyer you have become and what kind of lawyer we want to work with for decades. I admit it. I didn't expect either. I mean, I knew I'd get a big bonus, but $100,000 and, more importantly, a partnership? I stood stunned. Bobby, drink some champagne and say something, Mr. Quick said with a smile. I think they all realized that I was stunned. Mr. Quick, I am? No, 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 he interrupted me. As partners, we all call each other by their first names here. I'm Charles. Carlton is Jack and Bingham. Well, he's so old that maybe you should call him Mr. They all laughed, and Bingham jumped up. Bobby, call me Fred here. But when you pay me on the golf course, After I beat your young ass, you can call me whatever you want. More laughter, and I finally drank some champagne. However, I was still in shock. You're not working until the end of today, Bobby. Go and tell your beautiful wife this good news. I know that you need to complete some business on the mall deal, but the condition of the partnership is that you take a week off and recover a little after all the work that you've done. Take your wife on a cruise or something. Is that clear? Jack, the former Mr. Carlton, asked. Yes, sir, I replied, as I finally realized that I was back in my right mind. And, gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for the trust you have shown me over the past few years, for the impressive bonus and, most importantly, for the honor of being accepted into the partnership. This is the most magnificent achievement of my life. We all shook hands, finished our champagne, chatted a little more, and I went home to share it with Janet. As I said, it was the best day of my life. Janet was already at home when I arrived. The next day, Friday, was the last day of school, and on Thursday and Friday they worked half the day to give teachers time to finish grading and prepare report cards. Janet was busy working at the kitchen table when I entered. Honey, I have great news, I began, taking off my coat and tie. Bobby, I'm almost done, and I also have some news that I want to share with you. Just let me finish with the last report cards, and we can talk. I didn't insist and looked at the possible cruises departing next week on our home computer. The Caribbean would probably be the best option, but many options need to be worked out. It's hard work, you know, but someone has to do it. A little later, Janet came into my home office with a glass of wine and an expression of some concern on her face. Honey, you look like something's happened. Is it because of your news? Well, she began, but I interrupted her. You're not sick, are you? We can. I began in my typical lawyer problem-solving mode. No, I'm not sick. I just wanted to tell you about my schedule for next week. School is over, as you know, and I have signed up for courses that I will take from 10 to 2 every day next Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Oh, well, I didn't know what to say. This is the first time I've heard of the course, already dreaming of nights in the Caribbean over the next week. Could you please reschedule the time? I've already started. No, she interrupted me. James, the teacher, has already squeezed me in, and I've already made the prepayment. Wow. Okay, what kind of courses are these? Are they here in the city? Yes, here. Classes are held at his house, at James's house, on Laramie Drive. Oh well, what does he teach that the courses take place in his house? Bobby, listen. Okay? This is a course of love education. James teaches love techniques that will improve my love abilities. It's going to be really good for me, and good for us. I mean you and me too. Wait, what? Love techniques? In his house? You. My mind didn't understand what she was saying. She couldn't have meant what I imagined, could she? Janet, how many students will there be? Are all women or men too? Well, you know, it's just him and me on the first day, and then he says he can invite an assistant on the second day and maybe someone else on the last day. He calls it the grand final. Bobby, this could be very good for us. Yes, you've already said that. I want to ask, does this course mean that you will make love to this guy? Oh my God, I suddenly realized her words. And with his assistance too? Well, yes, of course. James says that practice is the only way to get better, and having different experiences with different people contributes to better practice. Honey, a few weeks ago, one of my school friends took this course during spring break. She says she had a great time and learned a lot. She said James rated her improvement from the base 80th percentile to the 92nd percentile in overall love activity. And my base is already in the 90th percentile, so I have a chance to score a very high score. Janet, are you crazy? I can't believe what you're saying. Your base? How does this James know about your level of love activity? You don't. I froze. I couldn't bring myself to ask if she was in love with this man. If so, then our marriage is over. She should know that. Almost 6 years ago, we swore an oath to each other in her church, and since then we have kept this promise every night. James says that it is important for him to know my basic level so that he can adjust the classes for me to achieve the best results. I stared at her in silence. It's not my wife talking. I should have asked. Janet, have you been in love with James yet? No, that would be treason. I have to make love only as part of the course. You know, this is a love education. Then how does James know what your basic level of love activity is? Really, Bobby, it was just to prepare for classes. Wait. Janet, you said James would have some assistance for the grand final. What does it mean? Multiple partners at the same time? Oh, I don't know. It depends on how I spend the first 2 days of class. James said that my high basic level means that I will succeed. And Bobby, my high basic level should be conditioned by the love that you and I have been making since we got married. We should be proud that my result is so high without any special training. James is talking. Janet, listen to me, please. First of all, I don't want to hear that name anymore. He's ruining our marriage. Well, actually, you're ruining our marriage. I asked you when we first started talking if you were sick. You said no, but I think you should be ill. Janet, my wife, the woman I've been in love with for over 6 years, can't plan love next week with multiple men. Janet, you're asking for a divorce now. You know that, don't you? Bobby, listen to me. Okay? James. Okay. I won't say his name anymore. The teacher said that you might react like that and suggested that I not even tell you about this course. But you and I have always been honest and open with each other, so I decided it was better to share it with you. Look at this course as one of your law education courses, only it's a love education, and I think I'll learn a lot more practical things than you'll learn in your law courses. I looked at her like she was crazy. How can a wife, how can my Janet, how can she? Oh shit, one more thought. Janet, you said you've already paid the deposit. Yes, $500, and the balance of $400 should be paid on the first day of classes. James, he is. He said he was giving me a $100 discount because my high basic level might give him the pleasure of teaching me. I just wanted to take a gun and shoot her, put her out of her misery. No one is going to put me in jail for shooting her after that conversation. Janet, please listen. I'm as serious as a heart attack. If you do that, I'll file for divorce next week. Considering what you've already done, we may end up getting divorced, but I have to think about it. If we have any chance of surviving as a married couple, I will definitely go to counseling. Do you hear what I'm saying? Bobby, I can hear you, but I don't think you can hear me. That doesn't mean I'm going to cheat with some guy I pick up at a bar. I would never do that. This is education. I believe in education. I believe in its importance, in the ability of a good education to make our lives better. I think you believe that too. I admit that such a love education is not generally accepted, but it will be good for me and for us. You have to trust me on this. Okay, Janet, I give up. Remember what I said about the divorce. I'm going for a run. Bobby, what about your news? You said you had news you wanted to share. Janet, my news is completely insignificant compared to yours. I went to our bedroom to change into my running clothes and also moved some of my things to the guest room. My run started terribly. My thoughts were too distracted by talking to Janet to let me relax while running. But after a few miles, I felt the stress go away. Running is probably the best therapy for me, and this jog was certainly a good therapy. I worked so hard that I neglected running, and after a few miles, I felt the result of this neglect. I headed home, or to what was my home. I wasn't sure if he was, after what happened. When I returned, Janet was in bed, which is good, because I had absolutely no desire to talk to her. I took a quick shower and went to sleep in the guest room. I got up early the next morning and left the house before Janet got up. When I got to the office, I saw that Jack Carlton had already arrived. Mr. Carlton, Jack, excuse me, Jack, do you have a minute? Of course, Bobby. What's the matter? I thought you'd oversleep this morning. Sir, I have a real problem at home, and I need help. And I told him a brief version of Janet's news. My God, that's a story. Okay, first things first. The first is a good family lawyer. I don't want to call her a divorce lawyer yet, but she definitely is. Elizabeth Jenkins. Don't call her Beth, Liz, or anything else, just Elizabeth. She's a very official person and, I think, the best divorce lawyer in Macon. Oops, I'm already talking about the divorce. Bobby, I hope it doesn't come to that, but I'll understand if it does. When I met Janet, she seemed to me a wonderful person, with a good head on her shoulders, reliable. From South Georgia, right? Yes, sir, and I agree. It's just so weird. I asked her if she was ill, but she says no. Well, if she has some kind of mental illness, she doesn't necessarily admit it. I think she's crazy, but I also think it's an insult for people with real mental illnesses to blame it on a mental problem. I'm afraid I think she just wants to make love with someone else, and this is her way of justifying it. Maybe. Anyway, the second thing we need to do is cancel your bonus. You shouldn't look any worse than you feel. I'm just canceling it for a while. If you get divorced, it would be better if you didn't have to share it with your ex-wife at that time. When all this smoke clears, you'll still get this bonus. And in the same way, we exclude partnership for the time being. But between you and me, both of these things, the bonus and the partnership, are yours. And since we, the current partners, haven't done anything official yet, I can, if it comes to that, testify that you are not eligible for either a bonus or admission to the partnership. Is it logical? Wow.
Yes.
It makes sense. It's just hard for me to come to terms with it. 24 hours ago, I was on top of the world, and Janet and I were an inseparable team. And now she's gone crazy, and I'm plotting something separate from her. Bobby, stop. Listen to me. You need to get out of the office. I know that you are a runner, and you like to play sports. Go and do both, and then come back and visit me. I'll call Elizabeth Jenkins and make an appointment for you today. Is it logical? Yes, thanks, it makes sense. And thanks for the help. Hey, that's what partners are for. I headed for the exit, but before that I looked into the break room to drink coffee. I was sitting there, just staring at the wall, and I wasn't even drinking my coffee when our secretary came in. Krista Mack. Something like that. I couldn't remember her last name. I took my coffee and went to the exit, but then I stopped. Mr. Thomas, are you okay? You look sick or something. Thanks, Krista. I'm just sitting here, you know? Well, maybe you should go home. I know you made a big deal yesterday. Everyone in the company is talking about it. You should go celebrate or something. You shouldn't just sit here. Yes, thank you, Krista. I won't bother you. I got up and headed for the exit just as she said. I'm sorry, you're not bothering me. I didn't mean to. I actually went out for a second run, which was short and not at all satisfactory. Back at our office building, which has a gym and showers, I worked out a little more until it was time to go to Elizabeth. No, Beth. I took a shower and arrived at her office in time to make my 1 o'clock appointment. Bobby, I'm sure it's okay to call you Bobby, she began. Right? After all, Jack Carlton said that you were his friend, which means that you are also my friend. She put air quotes around the term, and we both had a little laugh. God, it's good that I can laugh. Yes, that's what I told him. And I told the story again. Elizabeth listened, took notes, made sympathetic noises, and did not interrupt my sad story. I ended up like this. To tell the truth, she seemed to have lost her mind. The fact that she insists on having love with several men next week, and perhaps even with a woman, contradicts everything that she and I have believed since we met almost 7 years ago. I'm almost at the limit of my strength, even just trying to make sense of it. Okay, that's why I'm here, to help you understand and make some plans to deal with her plans. She plans to start this love education course on Monday, right? Air quotes again, but this time without laughing. Hey, that's right. So you have the weekend to change her mind. Yes, but... Wait, listen, let me finish. I think you should give her a chance. And I also think I should prepare a divorce petition to file on Monday afternoon if she continues this idiocy. If she backs off, I recommend serious marriage counseling to both of you. If, and I understand that this is a big if, you want to try to stay with her. I can prepare a fairly standard divorce statement this afternoon. The financial issues will be determined later. If necessary, we can hire a private investigator to follow her on Monday, or you can do it. If you decide to do this, you have to convince me that you won't do anything that could jeopardize your law license or put you in jail. If she does, I can ask to be served in the house where the adultery is taking place, and that's exactly what it is. If we are lucky, the course may be interrupted. Air quotes again. She liked to use them. I was already getting a little tired of her pretense, but she continued. And one more idea. She paid this James a $500 deposit. Both are crimes in Georgia, so she could end up in jail? Those damn air quotes again. For such crimes, they usually just fine you. Anyway, do you want me to prepare a petition? In case you need it on Monday? Yes, please. Just email it to my work account, and I'll watch it on the weekend. Accepted. And good luck this weekend. Maybe her head will fall into place. Not finding a better place, I went in my office. I don't really like to drink, and the thought of going to a bar, especially on a Friday afternoon, doesn't appeal to me. But the thought of returning home is even less appealing. I entered an almost empty office. At first I thought that even the secretary had left, but she ran out when she heard the bell ring from the arriving guest. Mr. Thomas, are you feeling better? Oh wow. Maybe it's none of my business, but you look even worse than you did in the morning. Have you been to the doctor? Krista, where is everyone? It looks like the office is closed. Well, Mr. Carlton announced that everyone had been working very hard for the last few weeks, and someone, namely you, Mr. Thomas, had just made a big deal for one of the firm's best clients. So he said that everyone could rest for the rest of the day. I'll just clean up a little bit myself, and then I'll go home. And that's nice of him. Krista, could you do one more thing before you go? I'd like a cup of fresh coffee, and this car always puzzles me. With pleasure. I'll be back with a fresh cup now. Black, right? Yes, thank you very much. A few minutes later, she returned to my office with a steaming cup. After a day at work, I needed something that could cheer me up. I thanked her again, and she went to the exit, but turned around to look at me. Mr. Thomas, I am? Bobby, Krista. Please call me Bobby. Good. Bobby. It sounds strange that I call you that, but I think it suits you better than Mr. Thomas. So, Bobby, I know that I'm just an administrator, but you should also know that I'm a kind person, and you look like you need kindness right now. If you need to talk to someone about what makes you look so terrible, I can be your advisor, listen, and not make any judgments about what's wrong with you. I stared at her for a long minute. She exuded such calmness, from this woman whose last name I didn't even know. Krista, listen, I hate to say this, but I don't even know your last name. McDougal. I'm Krista McDougal. I understand that these two surnames don't really fit together, do they? My mom is German and my dad is, well, he was Irish. I was named after my mom's mom, who died during World War II. Okay, Krista McDougal, why are you trying to be so nice to me? Except for drinking coffee and booking conference rooms, we didn't even talk much. Because you look so sad. I know you've been working very hard for the last few months. You're always here, and you're always nice to everyone, even when you must have been exhausted. So, I'm just trying to be nice to you when you look like you need it. Well, you're right. I'm sad and confused and angry, and do you really want to hear a very sad and, I think, very strange story? I hear you saying that you really need to tell it, so yes, I want to hear it. So, I told my story again, for the third time that day, and this time I felt that I finally got catharsis from my story. When I finished, Krista, my new friend Krista, looked at me for a long time. She burst out laughing. I joined her, and we probably sounded hysterical, or at least that's what it seemed to me. Bobby, this is terrible, and the story is terribly strange. There must be something seriously wrong with your wife. Yes, I think so too, but besides preparing for the divorce, I don't know what else to do. Right now, I don't want to go home and listen to her idiocy, so I'm kind of stuck. More thoughts on the other side of my desk. Bobby, I have an idea, just an idea at the moment. Come home with me and have dinner with my daughter, Mom and me. I'll make a great pasta with Krista. It's Friday night, and I'm willing to bet a lot of money that you won't cook anything special. How old is your daughter? 11. Do you all want to go to fast food? McDonald's, maybe, or Chick-fil-A, actually. Dana, my daughter loves their chocolate milkshakes. We go with her and leave Mom to watch TV. She records TV shows for a week and then watches them when Dana and I are not there. Okay, my new friend Krista, let's take our cars, and I'll follow you home to your place, and then we'll go to Chick-fil-A. That's what we did. Being with Krista and Dana really lifted my spirits. Dana had just graduated from elementary school and was going to high school in the fall. She was proud of her excellent grades, as was Krista. It was easy for me to just sit and listen to their conversation between mother and daughter, relaxing and sad at the same time. Bobby, how long have you been running? Everyone at the firm knows that you run in the morning before coming to the office. How far do you run every week? Did you run at the University of Southern California? Oh, well, yes, I ran at UGA, on the cross-country team in the fall and track and field in the spring. To tell the truth, I wasn't good enough to run on an NCAA team, especially in a Division I team like Georgia, but the coaches liked me. They liked my work ethic, and they let me run. I didn't even take a single place in any of the races, but participating in these teams was a great experience. They call me a scholarship athlete, which doesn't mean much, but I get great seats at football games in Georgia. Wait, Mr. Bobby, did you go to Georgia, play on Georgia teams, and go to Georgia football games? I love Georgia. Mom says that I can go there if I study well, because I will receive a scholarship from Nadezhda, who will pay for everything. Dana, you're right. The Hope Scholarship is a wonderful thing. You just need to keep studying to get it right. I know. Mom tells me about it almost every day. It was an 11-year-old child talking. She's quite mature, it seemed to me, and it's pretty smart of her mom to push her to get good grades. We talked a little more about school and Macon Bacon, our local minor league baseball team, and Krista, frowning, said about the upcoming concert in Atlanta. Obviously, there was some kind of promise to go there if a particular little girl got A's on her report card. Mom is fidgeting a little now. Well, ladies, I interrupted before the fidgeting and frowning intensified. I have to go. Thank you for including me in your dinner plans. The chicken was good, but the company was much better. You two have noticeably improved my day, and I thank you for that. Dana, it was nice to meet you. Krista McDougal, I'll see you on Monday, and I just want to say, I like your last name. I hope you both have a good weekend. As I was leaving, I heard Dana asking her mother, "What's your last name? What's he talking about, Mom?" That made me chuckle. However, the grin disappeared when I returned home. Janet was waiting for me there, ready to grumble at me for not coming home at the appointed time. I beat her to it. "Janet," I said, entering the house, "don't even start. I needed to be with myself. If you're not ready to tell me that you canceled your plans for cheating next week, I don't even want to be in the same room with you." Well, Bobby, I think I have some good news that you would have heard by now if you had come home at a decent time. I talked to James today. I talked to the teacher, and I told him that you were very upset about the course next week. Speak plainly, that you're going to have love with another man next week. I broke in with my own dig. God, Bobby, please. You have one opinion, and I have another. But I really love you, and I want to do what's best for us. So the teacher and I came to a compromise. He keeps the deposit for himself, and I go to class on the first day. At the end of the day, he and I decide if I will come to class again. If one of us, he or I, thinks that additional classes will not benefit me, I will not pay him the remaining money and will not come for further lessons. Isn't that a compromise you can live with? Janet, I think this whole idea is just an excuse for you to make love to another man and pay for it. I know you don't agree, so I have an idea. Let's call your mom and ask her what she thinks of your idea. Huh. Bobby, you know Mom and Dad. They believe that advanced algebra borders on sinfulness. Any kind of love education is forbidden in the Bible about 40 times. At least that's how they read it. So no, it doesn't make sense. How about another thing? We don't talk about it anymore until Monday evening. And I promise to tell you everything on Monday. If you think it's useless, if I haven't learned anything, if you promise to be really objective and tell me that I shouldn't go back there, then I won't. But you have to promise to be objective. Agreed? I just shook my head and left. Another night in the guest room and an early rise on Saturday morning for a long run. This time pleasant when it's not too hot yet, and quite slow until I warmed up, and then several accelerations in a row. Not my student days, but not bad for a 40-year-old lawyer. I went back into the house to take a shower. Janet still wasn't up, and I left the house to go where? Not to the office. I've seen enough of this place lately. Without any plans, without intention, without, hell, of course I intended to do this. I parked in front of Krista's house and rang the doorbell. "I'll open it now." I heard Krista's voice from inside. The door opened, and there she stood. Her face was stained with grease. Her hair was tucked under a white cap. She was wearing strange-looking gloves, and yet she looked absolutely beautiful. But her voice wasn't like that. "Bobby, what the?" I was cleaning the oven. "You can't." "Mom, come here, quickly." She ran back into the house somewhere. While I was standing, realizing that I had made a huge mistake, an elderly woman appeared. "I'm Mrs. McDougal," the woman said, "and you must be Bobby. Come and sit down. You did something back in Georgia, and my granddaughter thinks you could walk on water. My daughter might have thought the same thing last night, but now you come here when she's not ready yet? Who? Big mistake, mister." "You're right, Mrs. McDougal. I feel very stupid. You can't just tell her that I'm sorry and that I'll call her later or maybe just see her on Monday." "No, sir. You've shat on the floor. Now stay and clean up." She ran away to clean herself up, and you be polite enough to wait for her, say the right compliments, and explain yourself that you're sorry. Is that clear? "Yes, ma'am. You're right. I'll wait for her. Is Dana here?" "While I'm waiting, I could talk to her." "No, Dana is playing soccer, and Krista is supposed to pick her up in about an hour." "Okay, I'll just sit quietly." "Oomph," she said, walking away. I felt like an absolute idiot and wanted to slip away and never look at Krista again. But then she came back into the living room, and I was glad I stayed. Her hat and gloves were gone. She had time to wash and even put on makeup, put on lipstick, and change clothes. Of course, she looked great. She worked at Bingham, Carlton, and Quick for at least a year, and I didn't even notice. Maybe I've just never looked at her. My mistake. "Bobby." "Krista, wait, please. Let me tell you how sorry I am for barging in without calling. I feel very stupid for my idiocy and especially for embarrassing you. You should know, I met your mom, and she scolded me a little, and I deserved it all. Yes, she's pretty good at that. I do not know why you are here, and I was rather embarrassed when I opened the door." I started to interrupt, but she continued. "Wait, Bobby, let me finish. Dana is playing soccer this morning. How about we go to the football field together? We can watch her play, and you can tell us why you came this morning." Okay, it's okay, and once again, I'm sorry for putting you in an awkward position. It was terribly rude of me." "Yes, it was, but now let's put it in the past and go watch football." And that's what we did. We went to watch Dana play. Pretty good, but not great. During the game, Krista and I had time to talk. Well, I talked more, and she made sympathetic noises. After listening to my croaking and whining about Janet for a while, and the game was already over, Krista interrupted my monologue. "Bobby, you need to fish or take the bait. You know what that means, right?" I shrugged slightly, and she tried another aphorism. "Do you need to pee or get off the pot?" God, Bobby, you either have to accept what she says she's going to do, and I know you don't want that, or in the strictest and most angry voice, tell her that if she goes through with it, then you will absolutely, for sure, file for divorce next week. And you have to make her believe it. That's how our conversation ended. Dana came running with the joyful glow of an 11-year-old child who won the game. I offered to invite them to lunch, but Krista quickly declined. "Work from home is for both of them," she said. I dropped them off at their townhouse and headed out. Where else? To the office. I couldn't face Janet. I had already run away that day. I didn't want to call my friends, which would lead to awkward questions, and I didn't want to go to the bar. So I sat in my office and thought. A draft divorce petition came from Elizabeth by email. I looked it over, sent her some nagging comments, and finally went home. Janet was cooking dinner when I came in. She greeted me, didn't talk about the elephant in the room, and I didn't either. We had dinner together, politely talked about the weather and the school year, in general, meaningless chatter. I cleaned up after dinner, as she had prepared everything. When I finished, she was watching something on TV. I ignored her and went to my office. "Bobby, would you like to watch a movie with me on TV?" This. "No, Janet, we have a huge elephant in the room, and until we solve it, I'm not very comfortable sitting next to you. Next week we will make a decision. Either you stop your cheating plan, or if you do, I will file for divorce." I went on to my office. Later I went to bed, again in the guest room. I didn't sleep very well, but it didn't surprise me. The next day, Sunday, I went to exercise and then had breakfast alone, not bothering Krista and not wanting to see my wife today. Fortunately, Make and Bacon were playing at home that day, and I went to their game. They lost, but I had a good time immersing myself in the atmosphere of the game for a while. Eventually, the game ended, and I slowly, reluctantly headed home. I thought about staying at a motel, but I wanted to give Janet one last chance to save our marriage. No dinner together. I don't know if she ate it all. In the end, I made a sandwich and sat in my office until I was tired enough to go to bed. When I went to the spare bedroom, Janet came up to me. Bobby, I just want you to know that it's all over tomorrow. When you get home from work, we can sit down and talk, and you, not me, but you, can decide whether to come back for new instructions on Wednesday. Janet, we're just going around in circles. You're going to cheat on me tomorrow, and for some reason you don't see it. Your cheating will end our marriage, and you just don't see that either. Bobby, no, I promise you'll see. Everything will be better tomorrow. Crazy? I mean, really mentally ill? Or did she just go crazy because of some other person? Who the hell knows? I felt like she was driving me crazy. I didn't answer anything and went to bed. Monday began with a phone call from Elizabeth to assure her that Janet would be followed by a private detective if she went to a briefing. I went to work, but I didn't expect to be able to do anything real. He was sitting at his desk, literally staring at the phone, waiting for a call from a private investigator. Shortly before noon, the phone did ring, but the call was from Elizabeth, a divorce lawyer, not a private investigator. Bobby, a private investigator called me a few minutes ago and told me that he followed your wife to the house on Laramie Drive. She entered the house about an hour ago and still hasn't come out. This private investigator is also an employee of the court and will be able to hand her the divorce papers in this house if you want me to tell him to do it. Elizabeth, thanks for the message. I just don't have a choice. Please let her get the documents. Can a private investigator record this presentation? I mean, I'd like to see her reaction if possible. I'm sure the private investigator has a video camera. I'll tell him to write it down, and I'll email you later today. Thank you, Elizabeth. Let me know when I owe you more for your fee or the fee of a private investigator. Don't worry, take care of yourself now. Later that day, a video did arrive attached to the email. Watching it on my laptop, I felt only sadness, no anger, but there were no tears either. The camera must have been attached to the breast pocket of a private investigator. It all started when he knocked on the door. Finally, the door was opened by a tall, handsome, fit guy dressed in a bathrobe and looking disheveled. What's the matter? The guy shouted at the private investigator. I need to talk to Mrs. Janet Thomas, he replied. What? There is no one with that name here. Listen carefully, the private investigator replied. I am a sworn officer of the Macon-Bibb County Superior Court, and I know that Mrs. Thomas is in this house. Inform her that she must appear before me or suffer the consequences. Wow, I thought I should admire him. Everything he says is absolutely true and completely meaningless, but the jerk who opened the door obviously doesn't know that. Okay, wait a minute, I'll try to find her. He disappeared from the camera's field of view, returning to the house. Then, to my eternal sorrow, Janet appeared in the doorway, also in a bathrobe and also in a disheveled state. I'm Janet Thomas. Why are you looking for me? She said. Ma'am, may I see your documents? The private detective asked. She disappeared into the house and reappeared a few minutes later. Here's my driver's license. Now tell me who you are and why you need me. The private investigator brought the driver's license to the camera and then handed it back along with a folder of documents. Janet Thomas, you have been handed a divorce petition and related documents. You are advised to consult with a lawyer of your choice. Janet collapsed to the floor. The video stayed on long enough to focus on her lying on the floor and then went out. I must have passed out too, because I didn't move until I finally looked up and saw Krista standing in front of my desk. Bobby, she did it, didn't she? Oh, you're poor, darling. Do you want to? Oh, I don't know. I don't even know what to tell you. You can come to my house for dinner if you want. My mom cooked something, so it must be delicious. I know Dana will be glad to see you. Thank you, Krista, but I won't be good company for anyone. But can I use the invitation later? Of course you can. You can come at any time. Just don't forget to call first. The latter was said with a tiny grin. I grinned back at him. Thank you, Krista. I really mean it. See you tomorrow. Okay. She left, and I sat there feeling sorry for myself and even, believe it or not, feeling sorry for Janet. Whatever she wanted to get out of her love education, I knew it wasn't a divorce petition. In the end, I went to the nearest motel to spend the night. Janet called me on my cell phone several times, but I didn't answer and turned off the phone. A long night, little sleep, and a run the next morning that didn't help me in any way. That's how my life went for the next few weeks. I returned to the house before making sure that Janet had left to get clothes and other things I needed. I found myself an apartment, quite nice and close to work. I didn't talk to Janet at all, didn't even see her before our divorce hearing. Elizabeth and I were sitting at one table, Janet and her lawyer. The young guy Elizabeth greeted. Were sitting at another. I looked around the courtroom and noticed the man with the video. He pointed it out to Elizabeth. She shrugged and told me not to worry. I am not a trial lawyer, so it is rare for me to be present in court. The bailiff called everyone to stand up. We stood up, and the judge entered. An elderly woman in a black robe, already looking through the papers when she sat down at her elevated table. Lawyers, the case is Thomas versus Thomas. Are you both ready to start? They both answered in the affirmative, and she continued. Miss Jenkins, as the plaintiff's lawyer, you speak first, and I remind both lawyers, no theatrics. There is no jury here, so the performance will not help you and may get you into trouble. Is that clear? They both said yes again, and the judge nodded to Elizabeth. Your Honor, this is a direct divorce suit based on Mrs. Thomas's adultery. Mr. Thomas, my client, does not ask for or offer any alimony. There are no children, the marital home is rented, the savings will be divided 50/50ths, and both parties will keep their own retirement accounts. Everything is as stated in the statement of claim. She sat down. Thank you, lawyer. Admirably brief. I always appreciate that. Mr. Graham, as the defendant's attorney, do you have an answer? Yes, Your Honor. My client denies the charge of adultery, and we are ready to provide evidence that no adultery took place either in the form and place mentioned in the plaintiff's statement or at any other time. And what is your evidence? The judge asked. With your permission, Your Honor, I would like to call a witness. Of course, it should be interesting. Your Honor, I'm calling James Power to testify. Of course, the guy with the video got up and approached the dock. He was sworn in and sat in the witness chair. Janet's lawyer tried to present him as an expert on love education. Mr. Power, please tell the court about your relationship with Mrs. Janet Thomas. I was hired by Mrs. Thomas for educational purposes to conduct a short-term course in love techniques to improve her and her husband's love reactions to each other. Do you have the right to teach courses of love education? Yes, by the California Council on Sex Education, from which I have a degree. And do you charge for these courses? Yes, my standard fee is $1,000 for a 3-day course. In the case of Mrs. Thomas, she told me that her husband objected to the course, and I adjusted the curriculum so that it started with only 1 day of study in exchange for a $500 deposit she had made. Does this 1 day of training include love contact? No, ma'am, no. Mrs. Thomas received the divorce petition before we even got to the actual sexual intercourse. She was so upset about the divorce announcement that we no longer met for additional training. Thank you, Mr. Power. I have no more questions. The judge turned to Elizabeth. Counselor, do you have any questions for this witness? Yes, Your Honor, several. Getting up, Elizabeth whispered to me. Maybe you'll like it. Addressing the witness, she continued. Mr. Stringowitz, may I call you that since that's your real name, right? Well, my name is Power. That is, Stringowitz is the name I had when I was born, but I don't use it anymore. Did you stop using it because that name is listed in your arrest report? Objection, Your Honor. Janet's lawyer jumped up and started to speak further, but the judge raised her hand. Miss Jenkins, I tend to agree with Mr. Graham. How can this relate to the case? Your Honor, this is relevant in 2 ways. First, as you know, a criminal conviction affects the reliability of a witness's testimony. Secondly, Mr. Stringowitz's criminal conviction is related to the charge of adultery. You can go on, but you should know that I doubt the relevance of this. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So, Mr. Stringowitz, please tell the court how many times and for what offenses you have been convicted, in particular in the state of California. He looked at Janet's lawyer for help, but was left alone. Well, it was, prostitution, he finally whispered, as if that might help. Mr. Stringowitz, did you say that you were arrested for prostitution in the state of California? Well, yes, but... And how many times have you been convicted, pleading guilty, or being found guilty, on charges of prostitution pimping, or similar charges of receiving money for love. Do you agree that this number is at least 24? Your Honor, the plaintiff's lawyer is pushing the witness. I object, Janet's lawyer said. Mr. Graham, as you know, well, as you should know, the plaintiff's lawyer is cross-examining your witness and has the right to ask leading questions. Go on, Miss Jenkins. Thank you, Your Honor. So, Mr. Stringowitz, there are at least 24 convictions for love for money. Is that right? Well, some of them were simple. Please, Mr. Stringowitz, yes or no? Okay, then yes. Thanks. And as for your diploma from the Council on Sex Education, how many hours of classroom classes did you attend to receive it? Oh well, actually there were no classes in the classroom. You see, I got my degree mainly through practice. Do you mean on-the-job training? So, did you make love to students or potential students? Yes, that's how they learn, you know? That's for sure. Turning to your meeting with Mrs. Thomas, did you pre-qualify her for your love education course? Yes, I did it. It's standard procedure. And what methods did you use to pre-select her? Well, in simple words, I was able to assess the level of her experience and how comfortable she feels with these kinds of contacts. Thank you, Mr. Stringowitz, for the most informative series of answers. Your Honor, although this is unusual, I hope you will allow me to summarize Mr. Stringowitz's testimony. I think it will be useful for both my client and the defendant. Go ahead, Miss Jenkins. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Thomas, Elizabeth said and turned to Janet. And Mrs. Thomas, in his testimony, Mr. Stringowitz admits that he is a convicted male prostitute with a meaningless diploma, to whom Mrs. Thomas paid $500 for making love to her under the guise of education. Unfortunately for Mrs. Thomas, despite the disguise, prostitution in Georgia is still a crime for which Mr. Stringowitz can be arrested as a prostitute and Mrs. Thomas as his client. Adultery in Georgia does not necessarily have to involve what is called love. In Georgia, in the definition of adultery, love, as Mr. Stringowitz described it, is certainly considered love. So I'm afraid that Mrs. Thomas is actually guilty of adultery. Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness. Miss Jenkins, you've made your point very well. Mr. Graham, do you have an answer for the defendant? Your Honor, may I take a short break to consider Ms. Jenkins' arguments? The judge did call a break, and the hearing dragged on for a while, but Elizabeth clearly won. Later, she told me that it was quite easy to get information about the thong. He was kicked out of California for running his scams with too many stupid women, especially married ones. Janet was one of many. Speaking of Janet, as we were leaving the courtroom, I heard her complaining to her lawyer. But I didn't even make love to that asshole. The divorce was resolved on almost the same terms that Elizabeth presented to the judge. Janet was never arrested for her role in the relationship with Stringowitz, but he was accused of male prostitution and given a choice: leave Georgia immediately or spend 90 days in county jail. Of course, he decided to leave, probably hoping to find a better place for his love scam. Later, I found out that he made a mistake by driving through the small town where Janet's family lived. I have not heard whether he managed to get out of the city. Krista and I met, tried to start a serious relationship, but it didn't work out. I liked her mom and little daughter more than Krista, and I think she could understand that. But we became friends, and we still are. I got my big bonus and became a partner, but then John Thompson, my client, a mall developer from Nashville, made an offer that I couldn't refuse. He was quite impressed with my work on his Macon project and offered me a full-time position at his Nashville headquarters, with equity participation in his new projects. There is more risk than staying at a law firm, but, as it turned out, there is also much more reward. About a year after the divorce, I received a message from Janet's mom. She got my Nashville number from my old law firm and called to tell me Janet was dead. After the divorce, she returned to South Georgia and lived with her parents. She started having headaches, and when she went to the doctor, she was found to have a huge brain tumor. She died a few weeks later. A few months after I learned of Janet's death, I was in Tallahassee, Florida, researching a potential location for a mall. I decided to stop by her family's small town and pay my respects to her grave. There I found a tombstone. It looked like it had just been installed. On it were the dates of her birth and death, as well as the inscription: Janet Thomas, beloved daughter and loving wife. That made me back off. I stood there, lost, remembering the time I spent with Janet. So many good times and such a terrible end. Could her insanity have been caused by a brain tumor? This is really the end of my story, in memory of my loving wife.